Hey guys, just real quick, I want to apologize for the wind, but today is the onion video. So as you can see, I have a lot of onions growing in my garden this year. If you're new to my channel, the 2020 garden season for me is all about growing all the staples my family needs for the year. And onions is a huge one of those. I recently did one of my videos where I started the process of managing my onions so I can get the really big, nice bulbing onions. But I figure it's really important. A lot of people are struggling growing onions. I know I was. The first 3 years of gardening, I couldn't get anything bigger than a ping pong size onion until last year, where I completely changed up the way I was growing onions, and that was the ticket. So I'm going to talk to you about, there's really 4 major tips I guess I have to share about growing onions. And then I'll take you along for some of the processes on how I maintain my onions as they grow so that I do get those really nice big onions. So probably the first thing that I'll share with you is there are 2 ways to grow onions. And a lot of people choose to grow onions from what's called a set, and you buy them like in a bag or in bulk, and they look like baby little onions. Or you can grow them from starts. Either start them yourself from seed or buy starts already started for you. Whew. There is no rain coming, it's just really windy. So when I first started, I always picked up the bag of sets. And come to find out what that is, it is a second year onion. You're not gonna get an onion from that. You're gonna get green onions and great green onions if that's what you're trying to grow. But you're not gonna get your big slicers or your storage onions. So last year I bought starts from, last year I either bought from Johnny's Seed or Seed Savers Exchange, I can't remember. This year I bought from Dixondale Farms, who's probably the most reputable onion farmer in the United States with respect to distribution. So if you're looking for growing large onions, you will not get that from sets. You have to grow it from starts. Now typically when you buy sets from a distributor, starts, they're gonna come with the tops really trimmed back. And you're gonna see these onions are nowhere close to being ready, but I already have some top heavy growth happening here. You see, and I learned something new recently, that each stem growing on your onion plant represents one ring growing around your onion. And one of the key ways that you know when an onion's ready to be harvested is when at the base of the plant where the neck is, it falls over. It basically separates from the onion. You're gonna get that prematurely if you don't trim back your onion tops. So around 10 to 12 weeks after you've planted your onions out, you're gonna notice this. And that is not what we want. So I planted my onions, I'm trying to think, probably late March, and it is now the 1st of June. So what you're gonna do is just trim these back 6 to 10 inches, or no, excuse me, about 4 to 10 inches from the base of the neck. And the great thing about these, stay tuned, another video coming your way. You can eat them, of course, fresh. Who doesn't like that? But you can store them all kinds of great ways. The last bed I did, I just sliced them all up and put them in a gallon-sized freezer bag, basically fresh, to add to soups, stews, anything that you're making that would call for green onions chopped. With the rest of these, my plan is to dehydrate them and make my own onion powder. I wouldn't want to waste my good onions for that, my storing onions, so we will make some green onion powder. Basically, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm topping them off. That's what it's called, topping your onions. It's going to make sure that the onion itself, the plant, is forcing that energy, that growth energy, to the bulb itself. It's not overburdening the neck of the onion. So I'm gonna do the rest of those and we'll come back with what the next step is that you should do for big onions. So that's what my bed looks like now after I've topped them off. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you would be going for. One point that I should make is you don't want to do this too early. You want to wait till, because the plants do need the greens for good just plant health and growth and establishment. But once the bulbs start forming, which is usually 10 to 12 weeks after you've planted it, you're going to cut those back. And you probably only have to do it the once. I don't actually know that I've ever seen anybody do it more than once. I suppose if they continued to grow and you had a big windstorm that prematurely knocked them down, you could trim them back again. But let's move on to my favorite thing, but it is the hardest and most tedious task when it comes to growing onions, at least for me, onions at this scale. It wouldn't be too tedious if you were just growing, 50 or so onions. But that's something called spooning. I've already done 4 of 6 beds 2 weeks ago when I planned on trimming back my tops thin. I don't know if you guys can tell, but the soil here where my peppers are planted is a bit taller than the soil around the onions. And that is because when you do what I'm going to show you called spooning, you're removing soil around from where the bulbs are growing. And growing in a raised bed, it can get kind of tricky to figure out where to put all that soil. So let me maybe go to a bed where I haven't done it yet, and I'll show you what spooning looks like. Okay, so I have not done this bed yet. Let me just get rid of a couple weeds. In this bed, almost all my onion beds, I am growing carrots and onions together. They're a great companion plant. And you can continue to bury. If you've ever grown carrots before, so many times I lose like the top inch of my carrot because it gets exposed to the sun. And what I do enjoy about growing the onions and carrots together is I can move some of that soil around the base of the carrots and they do just fine. So these obviously haven't been topped. These were, of all my onions, this bed and the bed behind me had the smaller sets on them, so they just grew at a slower pace. But let me bring you down here and show you what you're gonna do. I'm gonna move this carrot out of the way. So here's the base of the onion, and basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna dig away from around the onion just until the roots are holding on, and give that bulb room to expand. Onions do not like to fight for growth room. And so you might find yourself with a bunch of extra soil like this, and then I just sprinkle it around the base of my carrots. And you're gonna do this continuously as your onions grow and mature. I would say I probably did it every 10 days or so as my carrots were growing. And this again is called spooning your carrots. I don't know why it's called spooning other than maybe old farmers took a spoon out with them to the garden. And see, here's a itty bitty one. I'm not even gonna bother doing this one. It's just not ready. But eventually you get to a place where you need to just move soil out of your way, especially when you're growing in raised beds. Because there's just not enough room to put all that. You don't want to expose the roots like that one. I just pulled back too much and exposed the roots. If you saw my planting onion video, this is one of the primary reasons I said I don't plant my onions too deep. Like, I just pack the roots tight because it's far less spooning than if you plant them super deep. You've got so much more dirt that you're having to manage around. So here you can see, this is the bed, the pepper bed that we were in. You're gonna see how the bulbs are getting nice and big, how I've spooned away from them and I've moved the dirt towards the center of the bed. And you're just gonna come out here and periodically check and make sure that, you know, the soil's not either been washed down tight around the bulbs or they're not getting challenged still yet. And just keep it to where just the roots are still underneath the soil. Okay, I do see some on the other side of the bed though that are getting challenged, so let's walk over there. So these are getting pretty, the soil, just watch how I'm just spooning that away again from around the base of the bulbs. You always want to keep your roots still under, but if I can't clearly see a round bulb on top of the soil, I know I need to do some work to it. Okay, probably the last tip, right? So tip number 1 was how you start your plants. Tip number 2 was trimming them or topping them off. Tip number 3, spooning. Tip number 4 is onions, and this is the most important. If you do nothing else, you'll still get something decent. Onions are heavy feeders, and you've got to water them well. So last year, I'm all out of it, but last year I just used organic chicken manure. They're heavy nitrogen feeders, at least once the bulbs start growing. They can tolerate a good phosphorus feeding while the greens are growing. So heavy nitrogen feeders, and you need to feed at least every 2 to 3 weeks. This year I'm using just an all-purpose fish fertilizer, and it's time for me to fertilize them again. Dixondale recommends, of course, kind of crop planting, so you've got long rows of crop, a pathway in the middle, and they recommend ammonia sulfate as the fertilizer. I've just never gotten my hands on any. So just something that is a very good rich fertilizer. So I am not going to bore you guys with this is a long process. That's something that you need to know. If you want those big beautiful onions, you've got to put the work in as a gardener. So I still have 1, 2, 3, 4 more beds to top, and a check on spooning on 4 of them, and then I've got to spoon what needs to be spooned in one of them for the first time. So guys, come back because I'm super excited. This year I'm harvesting more than ever out of my garden, using all the things that other years I might have looked as just compost and chicken food. So these green onions we're gonna turn into some amazing onion powder. So come back for that. And yes, we've got our next HOA garden tour series coming up this weekend, so I can't wait to share that with you guys. Talk to you guys later, and thanks for watching. Hey, and if you like this video and you enjoy spending time in the garden with me, I'd invite you to go ahead and subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you can get alerted when we put out new videos. Thanks guys, and I'll talk to you later.